Well, welcome back to In the Word, and welcome back to a new week, another Monday. And pray that you have a great week in front of you, and that you'll be spending time with me and with the Lord this week as we go through the book of Romans. Really a life changing book, history changing book in so many ways. We'll be in verse 10 today, chapter 1, verse 10, going through here at a pace of one or two verses a day. We have been in the introduction to the book in verses 1 through 7, the first part of the introduction. Paul has introduced himself, his credentials, has talked about his message. In the second part now, Paul moves to his prayers for the church in Rome, and he shows us his burden for that church. In verses 8 and 9, we saw Saul prayed to the Father by the Spirit and through the Son. And this is a good pattern for our own prayers as well. Now we're going to see the how and the what of his prayer as we move through here. Keep in mind as you are reading this, and you might want to turn back to chapter 16 of Romans after we're done today, and just take a look at all the people Paul addresses by name. You know, I believe that as Paul is writing this letter, he has in mind all these brothers and sisters who he knows personally. Paul had I call it Paul's posse. He had quite a large entourage of people. If you take the time and go through the book of Acts and his epistles and just write down a list, the unique people that he acknowledges or knows or is in association with, my recollection is you come up with about 70 names. 14 or 15 of those are women, and the rest are all men who are partnering with Paul. So here in the book of Romans, when you come to chapter 16, I believe there's about 36 people that he names by name. And I think he's got them in mind as he prays to this church. So let's look at verse 10 here. First, notice in verse 10, he's requesting. This is a petition. He's asking God. He's not demanding. He's not doing anything but just asking. And this is a prayer for himself, an intercessory prayer for himself. And look at the language he uses here. Really catches my attention. If perhaps now, at last, by the will of God. You know, Paul gives us kind of a peek into the how and what of his prayer. We see the how right now. He's praying for God's will to be done. He's first and foremost, he's asking first that God's will would be done. If perhaps, notice the tentativeness there, the open-handedness, leaving it in God's timing and God's way. By the will of God. Again, deferring to God, answering this prayer in his own way. I like that phrase too, at last, as if Paul has been praying for this for a long, long time. He has put it in God's hands, but this desire persists. And he says, I will succeed in coming to you. This is the what. The how is to lay it into God's hands. The what is to be with them. He's been asking for this for a long time. He's not given up. And I think that should be noteworthy there. Should be noteworthy for a couple of reasons. First of all, Paul is preparing for a visit here. He's going to come and see them. So he is in this way telling them that his visit is really a fruit of prayer and a deep desire that God has put into his heart. So it's not just a random visit. He's not coming to visit, going to Rome to see the sights. He's going to Rome to see them, and he is longing to be seeing them for a long, long time. And don't we know that God sometimes burdens us with prayers that persist for days and weeks and perhaps even years, perhaps our whole lifetime. You may have children or grandchildren, nieces and nephews that you pray for nearly daily. And this is a burden that comes from the Lord. And we want to be sensitive to the leading of His Spirit that we talked about in the previous verses. We want to be sensitive to the leading of His Spirit when He burdens us with something to pray for. And that consistent desire to pray is something that the Spirit empowers and enables. I'll tell you, for myself, for my wife and I, we have 6 kids, so we can pray for each child Monday through Saturday, and then all of them on Sunday. And then what we do is we pray for each child or their family or their spouse by name each day of the week. And then we also conclude that prayer for that particular child with praying for all of our children, all of our grandchildren, all of our sons and daughters-in-law. Maybe you do the same thing. Maybe you ought to. Maybe you ought to be searching your soul and see if God has put something on your heart to consistently pray for. And when you pray for these things, I know I'm guilty of this. I often ask God for something, as Paul does here, that He would succeed in coming to you. But I also sometimes tell God how to do it. I have my ideas, and I want to, tell God that maybe this is the right way to do it. And I find myself kind of put in check by Paul's prayer here. Leave it up to Him. Pray according to God's will and His way. And He will answer these prayers. He's not burdened us with prayer to frustrate us. He's burdened us with these prayers to bless us, perhaps, to surprise us, to show us His sovereignty. So when we pray for something, pray for the what, but when you pray for the how, I think one of the things we can learn from the apostle here in his prayer is to leave the how in God's hands. Leave it in God's hands. We can't really force God to do anything. We can't put Him under any obligation to us. We can't bargain with Him. Lord, if I do this, then I want you to do that. Lord, if I am good, I want you to bless me. Can't do that to Him. We need to pray according to His will and expect Him to answer. But expect Him to answer in His own time and in His own way, and allow God to sovereignly work to bring those long-term burdens of prayer to fruit. So brothers and sisters, as you go into the day and you go into the week, pray like this as you pray in the mornings or pray in the evening, whatever your habit is. I pray in the morning. Ask God for what you want. Search for that thing that's burdened your soul. Leave it to God, how it might be answered. And thank Him. Thank Him in advance for what He will do. God bless you, brothers and sisters.